right, welcome to the fourth wave of the content management system. This is the Tuesday keynote at Drupal Dev Days here in Cluj-Napoca. It's a real pleasure to be here. My presentation today will be about what I call the fourth wave of the CMS. Sau revolutionize, el patroneaval de sisteme de administrare de conținutului. Bună dimineața! Bine! Bine! Vă mulțumesc că ați venit la prezentarea mea astăzi la conferința Drupal Dev Days despre sisteme de administrare a conținutului și viitorul CMS. Este cu plăcere că sunt aici în România și la Cluj cu toată lumea din comunitatea Drupal. În opinia mea, este foarte important că avem o conversație în real Drupal despre viitorul comunității noastre. Mă numesc Preton și aceasta este al patrulea val de sisteme de administrare a conținutului. Sunt un manager de produs la Gatsby, în care sunt și strateg și apărător pentru dezvoltatori. De asemenea, sunt autor de Decoupled Drupal in Practice și organizator al conferinței Decoupled Days la New York. Și acum în limba engleză. Bine ați venit! Welcome. Once again, thank you all for being here. It's a real pleasure to be here at Drupal Dev Days. I have always loved being here in Cluj in Romania. My name is Preston, and this is going to be a conversation about the future of the CMS and about Drupal. You might know me from the work I do with Gatsby and with Decoupled Drupal. I'm the author of Decoupled Drupal in Practice, as well as the organizer of Decoupled Days in New York. What is Gatsby? Gatsby is a blazing fast modern web framework for turning content into performant websites without having to become a performance expert. One of the things we like to say at Gatsby is it's very hard to build a slow website with our technology. We have first-class support for Drupal, and actually just yesterday, I'm very happy to announce that we now have the Gatsby Live Preview module available on Drupal.org right now. You can test it out. I'll be showing a quick demo of it today, and bug reports and contributions are very much appreciated. We also have a Gatsby working group in Drupal, if you are interested in joining. It's a very active group on Spectrum with a lot of discussion about what's happening. Also, we have our first preview product, which is currently in beta. Our open beta will be opening very shortly. And currently we have first-class integration with Contentful and Sanity with other CMSs coming down the chute. I'm also the writer of this book, Decoupled Drupal in Practice, which is a book about decoupled Drupal, everything that you need to know about APIs in Drupal, web services in Drupal, as well as some of the technologies that you can use with Drupal. And I'm going to start by giving away one of these books right now. For those of you who have not read this book, what is chapter 14 about? Any guesses? Any guesses? Okay, raise hands, please. Raise your hand if you know. Okay, over there? Nope. Close. About decoupling. The what? Yes? Decoupling. Decoupled. The whole book is about decoupling. Yes. That's right. Congratulations. Chapter 14 is about GraphQL. Alrighty. Also, in about 1 month, we're going to be having our Decoupled Days conference in New York City. Everything that you need to know about decoupled Drupal. We have a lot of sessions about Gatsby, about GraphQL, about React, about Storybook, about Terraform, about Kubernetes, all sorts of things that are interesting to you. Unfortunately, we're already sold out of early bird tickets, but our general admission prices are currently available. Please follow us on Twitter and see our full schedule at decoupleddays.com. Okay, so now that we've gotten all the advertising out of the way, here's what we're going to talk about today. The first thing I want to talk about is why content management is so complicated today. Why is it that we have so many issues around how people are thinking about CMSs in this day and age? I want to move into a brief history of modern web development to frame this discussion. And then I want to talk about the first and second waves of the CMS and what those represented and what they were like, because we are in a very pivotal point in the history of the CMS. I want to talk about the third wave of the CMS, which is about headless and decoupled. And then finally talk about the fourth wave of the CMS, something that I call the distributed CMS. And then finally, I'll talk briefly about Drupal's place in that world. So, part one. One of the biggest issues that traditional CMSs, or well-established CMSs like Drupal, face today is a problem of divergence in priorities. We know that marketers and content editors want a certain level of control over those non-web experiences that they build today. One of the things that I do in the early chapters of my book is talk about what's called the channel explosion. It's very similar to the Cambrian explosion, which happened early on in the fossil record, and represented one of the most important proliferations of diversity in the fossil record among the life forms on Earth. And we're experiencing something similar to that today. We now have mobile applications that our clients need. We have set-top boxes, Apple TV, Samsung TV, Roku applications. We have wearable technology like Apple Watch. We have digital signage that's all over our cities and all over our universities. We have augmented reality in our museums. We have many different experiences that are now being used to help the user out. We also have things like conversational interfaces, chatbots, and voice assistants like Alexa. So we know, once again, that our marketers, the clients that we serve on a daily basis, need some kind of control, need some kind of content management system, or need some kind of ability to exert influence over what kind of content appears on these non-web experiences. And many of you who have seen my presentations in the past have seen this illustration before. I won't dwell on this because it is something from a past presentation of mine. But one of the issues that we have today is with this huge influx of new channels and new form factors that we are currently experiencing today, one of the biggest issues that we face is that our marketers and our content editors fundamentally only have a very fine-grained degree of control over websites and responsive design on those websites. They don't necessarily have control over wearables, conversational interfaces, digital signage, augmented reality, and so on and so forth. We are the developers who have to help integrate those tools. We are the ones who have to build Apple TV applications that are based on Drupal. We are the ones that have to build Alexa skills or Google Home applications based on Drupal. And so this leads us to one of the very important axes of how the CMS is evolving today. How do we serve these different audiences when we're trying to be API first, when we're trying to be agnostic to some of the devices that we want to use and serve? There's another trend that's happening which has been a little bit slower to develop. And it's been developing over the last 8 to 10 years through the microservices evolution and the ways in which the CMS has changed as the conception of what people want to use in our daily workflows as developers. Our developers today and our stakeholders today want better flexibility, they want better performance, they want better tooling, and most of all, those business stakeholders that we speak with on a daily basis and that we serve want affordability. They want efficiencies, they want return on investment, and they want a reduction in the costs that they have. And for those of you who are thinking, well, this is a developer conference, why are we talking about business outcomes? Well, I do think it's very important that we talk about business outcomes at this conference, because fundamentally, it's how we all get paid in the end. One of the things that is happening quite a bit is a conversation in our community about how affordable and how expensive our infrastructure is. How can we save money on the fact that we have websites that cost more than $1 million to host per year? I mean, this is a real number. We have companies, large companies that are paying huge budgets in order to have their infrastructure hosted on cloud hosting. Many large Drupal sites that I've worked with, that I've seen, are now running on infrastructure that costs more than $1 million per year, 7 figures. And this is unbelievable in terms of the amount of cost. One of the things that we've seen over the last several years is an evolution in hosting solutions. Now we have serverless and cloud-native solutions like Zeit and Netlify, which are much more affordable and much cheaper than established solutions that we see in the market today. And we have to ask why. Why is that the case? There's another thing that is really important to recognize, and that is that as a community, our resources have become more and more expensive. And what I mean by this is that we as developers are in very high demand. We have a very, very unique skill set as integrators, as developers, as designers, as front-enders, as accessibility specialists, as usability testers, who work within the paradigms that are established in the Drupal community. Drupal and WordPress developers command very high prices that oftentimes are unavailable or inaccessible to many small and medium-sized businesses. In addition, the amount of specialization that is now required, the amount of knowledge that you need to be able to successfully implement and maintain a Drupal 8 site is amazing. I mean, we have entire teams that are dedicated to these things at companies. And so one of the questions that people are asking is, this amount of specialization, is that something that is damaging? And is this something that is a high barrier to entry for those who are new developers to the community or companies who are looking to hire? Next, flexibility. The monolithic CMS, at the end of the day, we know is a little bit more rigid, is a little bit less flexible. There are certain benefits and advantages that come from this, obviously. We have the advantage of being able to have a very rich plugin ecosystem, to have a single flow across all of our development workflows, to have the ability to have a shared single approach to all of the work that we do on the CMS. But the problem is that today, many of the features that people want are very quickly outpacing or outperforming or even superseding some of the Drupal solutions that are available right now. And if you think about some of these small-scale services solutions like Algolia for search, or Snipcart for cart functionality, or Typeform, these are all companies that have grown after this monolithic CMS revolution. And one of the things that I often like to say is, did the CMS evolve too early? Is the monolithic CMS a symptom of the fact that we came too early to this point? Is it possible, perhaps, that the CMS might have been better served had it evolved during the age of microservices, or more recently than 20 or 30 years ago, or 20 years ago? Also, interchangeable services are very much in fashion right now. The fact that companies are now less interested in working with vendors that have a high degree of lock-in. And so we know that as monolithic CMS developers, oftentimes there's a lot of lock-in. You can't really migrate easily from Drupal onto other platforms. That's not by design. You know, it is easy to do it if you have a small site, but if you have a large site, it can be very onerous. And what about performance? This is something that obviously all of us are very concerned about. One of the things that we're finding today with Drupal is that there's a bit of a split between how Drupal handles the front end and client side, and how many of the CMSs that are used today actually are able to provide for or serve more interactive experiences. These developers who are building with API-first CMSs, they're looking for performance optimizations. Performance optimizations meaning not just some of the things that we do in Drupal, which are very good, including cacheability metadata, and including refreshless, and some of the amazing work that has been done, but also delivery optimizations, CDN support, all of these things that are important for scalability. And one of the things that we're finding is that much of the innovation in the front end is happening in JavaScript. There is a huge amount of innovation happening when it comes to lazy loading of images or prefetching when you're on a JavaScript-driven front end. Gatsby, for example, just a few weeks ago, introduced image lazy loading as soon as it got into the Canary build of Chrome. What about security? And this is another issue that I think is very close to our hearts. I still remember the day of the first vulnerability back in 2015. I know that we shouldn't call it Drupalgeddon, but it was a time that was very stressful for many of us. And how many of you were awake at night, all night, during that first vulnerability? Okay, so I think some of you remember what that was like. It was not a fun time. And the fact of the matter is that vulnerabilities are increasing. Drupal controls 2% of the web, WordPress controls even more. And what that means is that no matter what we do, no matter what our best efforts are, our security advisories are increasing in frequency. We have more and more vulnerabilities, more and more attack vectors, more and more ways that these folks are trying to access our systems. And we know, having worked with decoupled Drupal, having worked with headless CMSs, decoupled CMSs, that decoupled architectures can actually help to secure and make more inaccessible some of those CMS layers that we want to protect. And so this is actually one of the most important points that I want to make today, is that when you actually split out those vectors, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but when you actually split out your architecture into different services, it's much, much more difficult to attack. So the question I want to ask today is, given we've talked about the channel explosion and all of these things, the marketers are going in one direction, we're going in a different direction as technologists, is it possible to really satisfy the needs of both groups of people? My answer is, well, maybe we don't actually have to. Maybe we can do both. Maybe we can provide for all of these people that we need to serve in the Drupal community and beyond, in addition to our clients. More on this in a moment. So my question today is the content management system as we know it in decline, dying, is it dead? And many of you who have seen my talks in the past know that I've asked this question several times before, including last year at Lisbon. My answer is no. My answer is unequivocally no. In fact, I believe very strongly that a CMS renaissance is coming. We are on the verge of a new era in the CMS. And yes, I do believe it is coming soon. And yes, I do believe it'll be better than Game of Thrones and the finale that so many of us came to hate. And I do agree that it will be better than Lost and how bad that finale was. How many people watched Game of Thrones, the finale? Okay, was it good or bad? Bad. All right. That means I don't have to watch it. Now that we've talked about some of the foundations of this history, I want to talk very briefly about the history of modern web development. And some of this is content I presented before, but I do believe it's important because it really will help illustrate why the history of the CMS has progressed in the way that it has today. Many of us remember back in the early days of Drupal, prior to the promulgation of the Ajax API, prior to jQuery being in Drupal, that we had basically static pages in Drupal. And this is what I mean when I say that perhaps the CMS evolved too early. Every time you want to submit a form, every time you want to have a new application state, it required a full page refresh. Now with jQuery, when it was introduced into Drupal, we now had the ability to create dynamic pages. And this was unprecedented. DHTML, jQuery, I don't even remember the last time someone called it DHTML. But these kinds of technologies really helped us understand that applications are really fundamentally about interactions and interactivity. And then of course we proceeded forward into progressive decoupling, where we introduced Angular, or introduced Knockout, or introduced some of these lesser known, Mythical.js, for example, some of these lesser known frameworks and early JavaScript libraries and frameworks into our Drupal front ends to perform that client-side rendering. And of course now today, we have many websites that are used to provide server-side pre-rendering and only use Drupal as a data backend. So now you have a Node.js server that is rendering out the first application state that you want, and then serving that out to the browser. So the JavaScript Renaissance, which is really what we call the period of the last 5 to 10 years, has ushered in an era of innovation that has been unprecedented. I mean, I think that if you look at the amount of innovation happening in the JavaScript world, it is nothing short of incredible. And of course, this has led to new tooling and new workflows and new practices. And today, if you look at a traditional modern front-end workflow that exists in 2019, it's very different from some of the workflows that we have by default in the Drupal front end. So what does this mean? I was talking with one of my old roommates in New York, and he had never heard of Drupal. He had never heard of PHP, he had never heard of MySQL, but he had heard of MongoDB, he had heard of React, he had heard of JavaScript, ES6, TypeScript, CoffeeScript, Gatsby, even Gatsby, and GraphQL. One of the things that we're facing today is the fact that we can no longer be just writing PHP as developers and architects. We can no longer be serving an only PHP audience. We have to think about the future of the way web development is changing and how web developers are now entering our industry. I was shocked when I went to Gatsby Days in New York last month and discovered that there were so many young people who had never even actually known a world without Firebug or without Chrome DevTools. They had never known a world where there was no scaffolding, where there was nothing like Yeoman or Gulp or Grunt. They had never known a world where all of these things didn't exist. And it's very striking when you have conversations with some of these new developers, the world that they live in, and how spoiled they are. Because we all remember those days. We all remember futzing around with Twig templates and wondering what was happening and trying to refresh the page and clearing cache and not having access to Firebug and some of these tools. So one of the things I'd like to do with some of these folks who are newer to the web development scene is to really show them what life was like back in the early days. I've been doing web development since 2001, and I remember those early days when it was really kind of like cake PHP and that was it, you know. And Drupal was around, and that was when CCK had just gotten into Drupal 5. So what was the first wave of the CMS? Well, you know, it's what I call the static CMS. The first wave was really essentially what Dean Marker, who wrote the book Web Content Management, calls that they're essentially glorified static site generators. And in some ways, we've actually come full circle today with technologies like Gatsby and Gridsum and Next.js. They're essentially static site generators with rudimentary templating, whether it was Tickle, TCL in Vignette, or some of the older and really very rigid templating approaches that existed back then. And application building was really rudimentary. You didn't really have a sense of a CMS application. It was really built, it was really made for content-rich websites, and there was really no interactive client-side behavior. And I took some of these screenshots, and I remember thinking, wow, I remember this. I remember when things looked like this. This is Vignette v7. I mean, what version of Internet Explorer is this, 5? 6? I think it's 5 or 6, yeah. And so you can see that there's a lot of just, it's very, you know, it's very clunky, it's not very, you know, it's not very well designed. And you can tell that a lot of the ways that they handled the front end were very problematic. I mean, there was, you know, obviously WYSIWYG controls just like we have today with CK Editor and Drupal core, and a lot of the ways in which we've adopted many of these approaches. But fundamentally, this was something that was made for building content for a website that was going to be part and parcel of whatever experience you were building. This, for example, is Interwoven Content Center, which was a sort of file explorer, file-based file system for accessing content and files. And you can see that there's a lot of influence coming in from the FTP days, from those early days. And I've left out some CMSs here for a good reason, and I'll explain why later. You also had OpenText, which was, you know, something that is still, it still exists today, actually. You can still get versions of these CMSs and use them today. But as you can see, that was a very, very primitive era. We've come a long ways. Now, the second wave of the CMS is what I call the dynamic or the monolithic CMS, which is what I call true dynamic server-side applications for the first time. And this is Drupal, this is WordPress, this is Django, Ruby on Rails, some of these technologies that really, really worked on abstracting away some of the kludginess within the CMS. There was extensive abstraction. We know this from Drupal. We know that every single way in which we can make developers' lives easier is going to help us out in the long run. And of course, we had very rudimentary interactive client-side behavior, things like the Ajax API in Drupal, or plugins in WordPress that did similar functionality. So here's an example of WordPress. We know what WordPress looks like. We know how it works. But and we also know about Drupal and what it looks like. And many of the things that we have done with WordPress and Drupal are simply no longer things that are enough today. They're not adequate today. We can't simply have a single website and have a single content-rich website. We have to have interactive experiences and all of these things that I talked about before. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, number one, WordPress Calypso, which was a short-lived attempt to really improve the way that WordPress editors used WordPress. This was kind of the first, I would say, unthreading, or the first, kind of disentanglement of some of the things that people thought about CMSs. And of course, I would also be remiss if I did not mention, and let's give a big round of applause to the Admin UI initiative, please. This team is doing some incredible work. I see Christina right there, actually. And this team is doing some incredible work. And I just want to, once again, state that the fact that we are improving the content editor and marketers' experiences in Drupal is something that will yield amazing dividends very, very far down the road. And we'll talk about why in just a little bit. Now, what about the third wave? This is really what came about with the first establishment of Contentful back in 2012. It might be surprising to you, but yes, 2012 was when Contentful was actually founded as a company. But the third wave, what we call the headless CMS, or the decoupled CMS, or the API first CMS, are really meant to drive these dynamic client-side applications for the first time. Back in those days, in the early 2000s, people were reinventing the way that they built websites. They were using AngularJS. They were using Knockout.js. They were using some of these technologies that were really, really good at helping people build very rich client-side applications. And there's a very important notion here, which is a full and irreversible architectural decoupling between the structured data that you administer with your content and experience and the presentation layer, which is your JavaScript front end, or your mobile front end, or whatever you might be building out. And some of the client-side behavior was something that these CMSs began to exert a little bit more control over. Prismic, for example, introduced this idea of injectable edit buttons with data attributes, which was one of the most revolutionary things at the time, where you could actually put edit buttons on your JavaScript front end, and it would point all the way back to the exact page that you needed in your Prismic backend. That's something that is really unprecedented in terms of what's happening even today. Contentful obviously was an early revolutionary in this regard. And many of us were probably a little bit frightened when we saw Contentful. But the most important thing that Contentful borrowed from Drupal, and the ideas that Contentful borrowed from Drupal, included things like a custom content modeling system, including very complex fields, and also, of course, many of the content management features that we're used to today. And as you can see there's a little JSON preview tab, which might remind you of Contenta or the now defunct reservoir. Prismic is also a really good example of this. There's a lot of very interesting approaches that they've been using as well. But one of the things that you notice is that this is a UI that is very clean, and it's really unrelated to how the front end works. And that decoupling is something that has really taken hold in the CMS landscape. Also, Sanity.io is a new content management system that's surfaced just recently as well, which I highly recommend you check out, by the way, because one of the things that Sanity does really well is allow you to create a custom content model entirely through code. And it's actually really quite amazing. Also, of course, we in the PHP community took this on and said, hey, we're gonna definitely do this as well. We're definitely purpose-built for this. Well, maybe not so much. But WP API, for example, came out, and we have decoupled Drupal today. So we all know what decoupled Drupal is. They use Drupal as a content service. And we have these dual forces of innovation happening in front-end development and also channel exposure that I mentioned before that really led to this in the Drupal community. But it came about because of Henry Ford's assembly lines in Motor City, Detroit, and other places, industrial centers in the US. And one of the most fundamental ideas of this was interchangeable parts. And this really completely reinvented the way that factory floors worked and how manufacturing proceeded in the modern world. There's three things that really happened because of this. Pipeline development, which means you were able to actually have non-blocking development workflows. Also interchangeable presentation layers where you could switch out very quickly a presentation layer for a different one, meaning you could have two parallel systems that didn't need to be relying on one another. And also one of the most compelling ideas that I think has emerged from the decoupled CMS paradigm, which is API convergence. The fact that during the discovery stage or during the initial stages of your development of a site, you can have your backend developers who are working in PHP or Ruby or some other technology, and your front-end developers working in JavaScript or Elm or what have you, agree on a dummy API. Test against that, build against that, the backend developers implement that, and the front-end developers just build against that dummy API, and when you turn on the API, it just works. This is a very important idea, and many decoupled CMS projects work like this today. Also, updates and maintenance. Back in the day, you would have to switch off your entire Drupal site. But now, with decoupled updates and interchangeable presentation layers, you can do that very easily with just updating your backend and keeping your front end intact. For example, I recently updated my Drupal site to 8.7.1, or whichever the patch version is now. And I actually, my Gatsby site did not go offline. There was no maintenance mode needed, nothing at all, because fundamentally my Gatsby site is static. So this is the beginnings of the distributed CMS. The fourth wave is happening right now. I would say that it has started last year, or in the last couple of years. We have very richly interactive, performant, universal JavaScript applications that have server-side rendering, that are able to do a lot of the things that we expect. And not only do they have full architectural decoupling, they also have full presentational decoupling with interchangeable services and data source agnosticism. It doesn't matter where you're getting the data from. For example, my personal site right now is a Gatsby site that is pulling from Drupal 8 and pulling from Contentful. And soon I'll be adding other CMSs to it in order to do some testing and make sure that our Gatsby preview product works. And this is all things that we can do now with this agnosticism idea that is really taking hold in this community, JAMstack. And so it's a first-class concern now. And one of the things that's come about is that the orchestration of microservices here brought us this idea of a service mesh, a content mesh that pairs services with an agnostic front-end layer. And so let me explain the content mesh in just a little bit, but the page in this paradigm becomes decoupled too, not just the architectures. And let me illustrate this very quickly. Originally with Drupal, back in the day, we would have a handling of all concerns with Drupal features. So Drupal modules would run login search, there would be Uber cart, Drupal content, obviously the form API, the Google Analytics module. All these things were contained within the Drupal community and the Drupal ecosystem. Today, what we're experiencing is many people and many startups and many of these early adopters of the JAMstack, many of these early adopters of the new front-end development practices are saying, well, you know what, I don't necessarily want all of that from Drupal. I just want the content. I just want that little piece of data. Because I have Algolia handling my search. I have Auth0 handling my authentication. I have Contentful handling other content on my page. I have Typeform handling my forms, and Segment for analytics, and Snipcart for cart features. So one of the things that we're seeing is this evolution of the page, where originally it was monolithic. It was all driven by Drupal. Then we decoupled it, and we brought in content and data from Drupal. And now, what we're seeing now, that because of this introduction to flexibility and interchangeable parts, is we're seeing a decoupling of the page itself, a decoupling of the presentation layer itself. One of the co-founders of Gatsby, Sam Bhagwat, he wrote a series of blog posts about this very idea, which he calls the content mesh. I call it the distributed CMS. It's a very, these ideas are very much wrapped up in one another. But as you can see, there's a very rich array of possibilities that emerge when you think about different services and leveraging some of these modern approaches that do not tie us necessarily to Drupal. So let's go through some of these advantages again about the distributed CMS. Your TCO is going to decrease. By the way, I mentioned that I have my Drupal site. I've got a Gatsby site that runs on Drupal 8 and Contentful. I'm paying $0 in hosting. $0, because I don't care what my custom domain is in Drupal. It can just be a free Pantheon site. I don't care, I don't have necessarily that much content in Contentful. And I don't really have much need for anything other than static site hosting. And so Netlify and Zeit are both some of those companies that offer very affordable solutions. Also, Java developers are easy to find. Resourcing becomes a little bit less onerous. Many of the Drupal agencies that are represented in the sponsors and also all around the community are now actually hiring JavaScript developers in addition to Drupal developers. Also, this notion of interchangeable parts. The distributed CMS, this idea that was introduced by decoupling, is flexible by design. Now we have this idea that presentation layers and pages in and of themselves can be decorated with flexible services and have a very rich understanding and a very rich diversity of their customers' needs. And finally, performance. Gatsby and other JAMstack technologies are very, very much supportive of accessibility. Actually, Gatsby has an accessibility statement. We have a very, very clear focus and a very, very clear commitment to accessible solutions. We also have progressive enhancement, which means that every Gatsby site, if you disable JavaScript, it still works. There's no issue if you disable JavaScript. And now, thanks to these serverless and cloud-native solutions and CDNs, it's now possible to achieve incredible levels of performance. I'm still shocked at how fast my Gatsby site is. In terms of security, and this is very important, and one of the questions that I received since I wrote my blog post last week about this is, well, what happens with the whole idea of, and I don't like this phrase, but this is a very common phrase in CMS business, one throat to choke, right? One vendor to critique, one vendor to work with. Well, the problem is that if that one vendor falls over, or if there's a problem with security for that one single platform, all of your site goes down. Everything, every single feature goes down. And so why not delegate some of this vulnerability to other services that might have better other approaches? And with Gatsby and other JAMstack technologies, it's actually possible to lock down your CMS. One of the things that's actually possible with these technologies is to have your Drupal site on your local host, render out your Gatsby site, put it up on a Gatsby host, and that's it. You don't need the CMS to even be accessible via the web, which means that your content editors can be working in a completely locked down firewall environment and your content safe. So the evolution of what I call now is not the content management system, it is now the content management stack. And if we can move from this idea of the CMS from the content management system, a single end-to-end system, to a whole stack of possibilities, you can see why the distributed CMS has become such a popular idea. And optimally today, to go all the way back to what we were talking about in terms of the approaches that people want, the marketers and the developers, how do we satisfy both of those priorities, both of those needs? Well, the good news is that decoupled Drupal is still really good for those other channels, for things like serving content to augmented reality, interfaces, mobile applications, and so on and so forth. But for the website, it's very compelling to have this idea of not only interchangeable presentation layers, but also interchangeable services within those presentation layers. So for those of you who have been a little resistant to decoupled Drupal, I highly encourage you to try it. Take a look, do some experimentation. It will not limit you. It's going to open the door to many different possibilities. And the headless CMS today is very rapidly yielding to a more truly and authentically decoupled architecture for CMSs. The distributed CMS represents the fourth wave of the CMS. And the new content management system is not a single contiguous system. It is a full stack. It is an architecture. It's a distributed, multifaceted milieu of services that are all interacting and are flexibly interchangeable and can be plugged and played however you can imagine. So the third wave is about decoupling CMS architectures. But the fourth wave is about decoupling presentation layers. And the third wave was about interchangeable presentation layers, taking out Vue.js, putting in Gatsby, taking out Gatsby, putting in something else. And now the fourth wave is about interchangeable in-page services, Algolia, Typeform, putting in some of these really amazing startups that are doing incredible work today. So to end here today, I want to talk about what role Drupal has to play in this landscape. Because I realize that after this talk, some of you might be feeling a little bit pessimistic. But actually, I believe that Drupal has a very, very promising future ahead if we can get this right. But first, as a quick break, I wanted to give away these last two books that I have here. So can someone give me an example of a static CMS that I did not mention today? If you could raise your hand. Yes? What's that?
Tone.
Yes, Tone?
Yes.
For the first one, the static CMS, Tone I would say is more JAMstacky. It's kind of related to JAMstack. Anyone else? Yes?
Hugo?
What's that?
Hugo?
No, Hugo I would say is more kind of, once again, in the JAMstack realm. Yes? Joomla. Joomla, no, second wave. Joomla, I would say a second wave.
GitHub pages?
Nope. Yes?
Your issues from Perl community.
Oh my gosh. Wow. All right, I'm gonna have to give you one because that was a good answer. The Perl community. Wow. How about an example of a monolithic CMS that I did not mention? So not Drupal, not WordPress, not Django.
Graph.
What's that? Graph? Graph.
Yeah.
I have never heard of that. I have never heard of that. Can someone confirm, is that correct? What's that? What's that from? Mambo? Okay. I've never heard of that either. Can someone confirm that as well? Okay. As you can see, I didn't really prepare for this very well. I thought someone would say minimal title, or someone would say, something else. But anyways, so we have this timeline for the CMS. And obviously, it's not perfect, and there's gaps. There's other CMSs that don't quite fit this model. For example, Typo 3 is one of those that or Sitecore is one of those that don't quite fit into this model very well. But I do think for the evolution of CMS, it's a very interesting idea. So I want to finish here with just a couple of final thoughts. Just yesterday, just as I was writing this presentation, finishing it up, there was the release of Gatsby Live Preview with Drupal. On the right side, you see a Gatsby site that is pulling data from Drupal. And as you can see, you have a live preview of what's going into Drupal. This is very similar to the demo that Sally Young has given with React. But this is something that at Gatsby we are very much planning to support, and something that we do want to work on with you, the community. So I highly recommend you check out drupal.org/project/Gatsby. Check out our progress, see what we're doing, clone the repo, take a look, and join the Spectrum community as well, because we have a lot of conversations happening there. So many people believe that because I moved over to Gatsby, or because I've been talking about the challenges of the CMS for so long, that I believe Drupal is in decline, and nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, I believe that Drupal may be on the verge of another renaissance. I believe that Drupal may be at the point where we're going to have a huge amount of growth. Because fundamentally, we as a Drupal community have evolved and innovated and progressed in very unexpected ways, in ways that have really kind of surprised even me, being in the Drupal community for so long. And what that means is that we as a Drupal community are going to distinguish Drupal in this new day and age. We're going to make the Drupal community, as a Drupal community, we're going to make Drupal something that will be very powerful for us. And I want to say that the decoupled CMS is only the first step in a coming revolution of CMSs, from content management system to content management stack, from the decoupled CMS to the distributed CMS, a more networked, service-oriented CMS. And I want to ask all of us to imagine how we can stay, and how we can imagine a rebirth for Drupal in this idea. How can we better serve these users who are coming to us looking not for the traditional uses of the CMS that we had in the past, but are looking for better data, but are looking for better content handling, are looking for a great UI for their content editors and marketers, like what we're doing right now. The distributed CMS is not only going to mark a rebirth for the CMS, it's going to mark a rebirth for web development and for digital content. If you want to learn even more, please follow me on Twitter, and also I have a blog. I just published this blog post earlier last week about some of the ideas that I just presented. Please feel free to take a look, and my blog will have much more about this in the coming weeks. Mulțumesc mult, and thank you very much. Now, questions? Here we go. Alrighty. So, I think I have time. How many do I have time for? Could think about it? 10 minutes, okay. So, The first one, which is the biggest challenge of moving from a monolithic architecture to a decoupled architecture? In my experience, I would say it has been authentication and private content. One of the biggest challenges I hear about on a daily basis is that authenticating Drupal content when it goes out into a different front-end layer is very, very difficult. However, there are solutions that are emerging for this. Obviously, we have Mateo's simple OAuth module that has been used quite a bit. I used it, it's very powerful. But there are also other solutions that you can pair with Drupal that might be something you might want to consider, like auth0. If you don't need a whole lot of permissioning, if you don't need that full roles and permissions table, you might want to consider a solution like auth0. I know we also have a JWT module, a JOT module in Drupal. It's been 6 to 8 months since I've tested it, so I can't guarantee any stability there. So that's one of the things I want to say. Authentication is one. I would say the other one is really preview. Being able to give the marketers and the content editors that we work for on a daily basis the ability to preview their content. And my hope, of course, is that our Gatsby Live Preview module will help those users who want to use Gatsby with Drupal in a content workflow. By the way, I want to thank the team at 30 for working on that module. I didn't have a chance to say that earlier. From Flores, okay. After the keynote, there's a law on CRM with Drupal. What would you recommend with regard to architecture for making the distributed CRM a success? That's a very good question. I personally have not really worked with many CRMs. The last CRM I worked with was City CRM, and that was years and years ago. But I think that, once again, one of the things that is most important, there's two things that are really important. I would say number one is obviously the APIs, the web services that allow for you to extract data out from the CRM system, and then also the ability to actually have a very rich array of JavaScript integrations with that plugin. So how will you expose that information out to your front end? How will you present that information in a way that makes sense to developers and to users? It's a very important question. But once again, I don't know much about CRM systems, so someone else might have a good answer for that. Next question, do you consider decoupling CMS actually doubles the efforts for maintenance, security, resources, and costs, especially for enterprise projects? So I would say yes and no. When it comes to security, absolutely not. I would say security actually is one of those areas where decoupling the CMS could be beneficial, especially if you lock down your CMS in Gatsby approach where you firewall your CMS or you use an approach that is very much intended to keep your CMS on lockdown. However, security is a big concern, but one of the good news is that in JavaScript, there's been a lot of work now to improve security. React, for example, and Angular and Ember.js have all worked very hard to make sure that their frameworks are secure, input standardization, all of that. So when it comes to maintenance, I would say that it really depends. And this is where, for the enterprise, it becomes a little bit of an issue, where if you have a team that is very effective in terms of that split between the front end and back end, and you have many folks who are experienced in JavaScript on your team, and this is really something that comes after a good amount of resourcing and good decisions on that front. I believe that actually that's a little bit less of a concern. Now, for other things like resourcing or cost, in terms of cost, actually I would say, as I mentioned before, for the enterprise, I think this will actually be cheaper. Because one of the things that we're seeing now with a lot of these serverless and cloud-native solutions is usage-based approaches to pricing, as opposed to page views or some other arbitrary kind of metric. And when it comes to usage, if you think about the fact that the resources that you actually have to use are very small, given that many of these JAMstack technologies are fundamentally just web compilers that just yield initial HTML and some JavaScript to decorate, it's something that is very powerful. And then for cost, for resourcing, I mentioned resourcing. For cost, once again, for enterprises, I would say that certainly the JAMstack and certainly the distributed CMS world is not ready for, I would say, some of the larger enterprise websites. There's a lot of functionality that needs to be implemented, but I do think that in the near future, enterprise level projects will benefit from approaches like this and will definitely benefit from reduced costs. If you look at the amount that you spend on a full Drupal site versus a collection of services like Avalia, Auth0, plus Gatsby on Netlify, and maybe a Drupal site posted somewhere, you're actually paying a lot less because you're able to cache your Drupal site a lot more. You don't necessarily need to have your Drupal site be something that's hosted per se. There's a lot of ways that you can do this that are very compelling. Oops. This is where it is. Okay, I think I have time for one or two more questions. Let's see, doesn't the fourth wave increase build and orchestration costs? That's a good question. I think that when it comes to orchestration, yes. When it comes to build, no. Orchestration is very challenging. It's a very difficult problem. And I do believe that obviously with these multiple services and so on and so forth, it does become a little bit more of a concern. But the good thing about some of these services that exist now, and some of these ideas that now are very powerful, is that they handle all those concerns for you. Like Avalia, for example, will handle all of those issues for you. And if you are considering something like this kind of architecture, then you obviously do have to think a lot more about orchestration. But I think some of the DevOps folks in the room or some of the orchestration folks in the room can might have more informed perspectives on that front. When it comes to builds, actually, I would say it's much cheaper, it's much more efficient because your build workflow is just completely reinvented. You're no longer maintaining a database and running a database. You're no longer running a site. You're no longer running these things that require constant server, constant running of servers and load balancers and all that. What you have now instead is the fact that with many of these JAMstack technologies, you can have a static version that is literally just a set of files and is very, very easy to host. And it's something where you can spin up something and spin it back down, and there's no need to keep it running for a very long time. So when it comes to builds, I would say that it's actually a much easier approach, but happy to talk about that as well later. Now the last one I'll talk about is Drupal already CMS doomed to become a microservice, or does it have a place to combine microservices? That is a great question, and that's the last question I think I want to talk about, because I do have an interesting answer for this. I remember about 3 years ago, back when decoupled Drupal was really coming into vogue in the Drupal community. This was back when we had folks like David Wong getting permissions about the decoupled front end in the future. This is back when we heard about people doing really nifty things with Angular and with other PHP front ends, Symfony front ends, and so on and so forth. And I remember I was at MidCamp in Chicago, and I was talking to Daniel Maynard there. And one thing he said really stuck with me through all these years, and has stuck with me for a very long time. It's been something I've thought about ever since, which is that we should never consider Drupal to be a single software project. We should never consider Drupal to be just a single CMS. Drupal is a community. Drupal is an ecosystem. Drupal is not just a single software project. And we see this because we have incredible innovation happening right now when it comes to contend.js or some of the other front-end tools like the Drupal iOS SDK, some of the water wheel SDKs that were built a few years ago. And so I don't actually believe that if we can really branch out some of these other technologies. And that's why I exhort all of you to really take a look at these new technologies. Take a look at Gatsby. Take a look at Gridsom, even though they're a competitor of ours. Take a look at Next.js. Take a look at some of these really interesting tools. Think about how Drupal fits in and what you can build based on Drupal. A really good example of this is Sam Mortenson's Tone, right? Which takes Drupal's render API, takes Drupal's render trees and creates a static site generator from that. I mean, that's a really, really powerful and compelling approach. Not render trees, but configuration of these and so on and so forth. He's doing some amazing work. Please check out Tone as well. I think it's really impressive as a project and very interesting from the standpoint of what we're talking about today as well. But fundamentally, my dream and my hope for the way Drupal evolves in the future, and this is my opinion, by the way, it's not something that I believe anyone else shares, is that if we can create an ecosystem like the one that is going to provide for all of these different approaches that people need, and have integrations that are rock solid with a lot of these technologies, we can guarantee an amazing future for Drupal. Because this is the other thing about Drupal that I said last year at Front United in Utrecht, is that if you think about Drupal as not only the Drupal backend, but also the various front ends that integrate with it, the Gatsby front end, it could be the mobile app, it could be so on and so forth. That's still Drupal. And that's fundamentally what I think Daniel was saying back in camp all those years ago about the future of Drupal. Thank you very much. What's missing?